Hello everybody and welcome back to the Ant Holleufer YouTube channel. Today we are talking about hibernation. Now, why do I talk about hibernation in the middle of November, maybe even close to December? Well, the people who are hibernating their ants are probably already now hibernating their ants. But those who aren't hibernating their ants and probably not planning on hibernating their ants, this is a video for you because personally I think you should always hibernate your ants. At least if you are in a country where hibernation is required. As most places around the world you don't really need to hibernate your ants, but if you are in these colder climates where it gets really cold in the winter, you need to hibernate your ants for both their benefits and just a break from you. But now let's talk about why do we and why do ants hibernate. Now, as a rule of thumb, hibernation starts from October and ends around February. Some people hibernate in the beginning of October to in the end of February, and others in the end of October to the beginning of February, depending on, well, how much activity you want. I started hibernation a bit early this year as I just needed a break from feeding all the colonies, so I started in early October. One of the more common questions is, why do we hibernate our ants? Because it's not cold inside. And that is for one reason and one reason only. It is what the ants will do, and that's what the ants want to do. The ants have a natural cycle that slows down during those later summer months, and as we go into September, October, the ants will automatically expect hibernation starting. They often show this to you by blocking off the nest entrance if they have a naturalistic setup, or if they just have some kind of substrate in the nest and in the setup. They will just block off the entrance, as that is what they do in the wild. Now, another thing that you will start to see is the entire colony will pretty much stop. And that is because the reason the ant colony exists is pretty much to go out, get some protein for the brood, get some sugar for the workers. But in hibernation, the brood doesn't develop. The queen will simply just stop laying eggs, and the eggs will turn into larvae, but they won't pupate. Therefore, you often have a lot of larvae without any eggs and without any pupae, and that is a clear sign that hibernation is upon you, and that is how the ants naturally slow down to hibernation. The reason this is happening is in winter the ants can't go out forage, they can't go out and get protein, and therefore, well, the colony can't grow when they can't get protein. I speculate that the reason the colonies often stop in larvae stage, it's not all colonies that had overwinter brood, like Formica fusca, they don't have overwinter brood. But for the colonies that do have overwinter brood, these eggs, I think they are only when they go into larvae stage, I think they're only fed with some sugar, as how workers get along is to work with their sugar. They run on sugar and everything is just around this sugar. And I think during hibernation, they also just feed the larvae these sugars. That makes them not grow, but it makes them keep staying alive. Whereas if an egg, well, the eggs will hatch into a larvae no matter what. And the larvae, if it's big enough, it will go into pupae stage, and that pupae will hatch no matter what. But when they are in this larvae stage, the workers are able to just feed it some sugar and keep it in this larvae stage. But the workers won't stop foraging just yet. As I just said, the colony still needs a lot of sugar. So what they will do in these later months getting close to hibernation is they don't really go that much for protein, but they go crazy over sugar. Example, if you feed your colony, they will probably not accept the protein, but they will probably swarm the sugar. And that is because in hibernation, they don't go out and forage, they just run on that backup sugar. Meaning that if they run out of sugar, the colony isn't looking too great. And that's also why I personally feed my colonies once a month. I feed them some sugar in hibernation, as, well, it's always good to give them some extra supplies. Another common question is, how do these ants survive outside? If it's minus 10 degrees, why can't I put my colonies in minus 10 degrees? Well, simply your colony will probably and most likely die. Now, the reason the ants don't die outside is because they dig down. Only a few meters, around 1 to 2 meters down below, the ground doesn't get cold at all. And that is just because, well, it takes a lot of time for the frozen ground on the top layer to just slowly get down. And therefore, the ants just simply dig down between 1 and 2 meters. And down there, it doesn't really get these really cold temperatures. They get down to these well, 5 to 10 degrees, and that is the sweet spot. And down below ground, the ants will also get close together in small balls of ants, and that is once more just to keep the body temperature of the entire colony a bit further up. But just like normally in a nest, they will still move a little bit around depending on where it's hot, where it's cold, and where it's the most humid, both for larvae and, well, the colony. So you will still be able to see the colony move around in your nest if you have them in hibernation, as they constantly adjust. But you will most likely just see a lot of ants just pile up together to keep body temperature a bit higher. And that is why ants in the wild hibernate. They are forced to do it by, well, they are not getting protein because it's winter, so they stop laying eggs, they stop developing, and well, they can't forage because it's -degrees outside. But the real question is still, why do we as ant keepers then hibernate our colonies inside in these hot temperatures? Because you can, without any troubles, have your colonies at 20 degrees all hibernation long. Why don't we do that? Well, the biggest reason is the ants will still go into hibernation because the clock inside the ants will still say, oh, it's hibernation time, we gotta prepare for hibernation. And you will see this no matter what. The thing that's really bad about skipping hibernation is the workers will not really forage because, well, they're preparing for hibernation. They don't know when winter will come. When they are preparing for hibernation, it's not yet cold outside. They already do this in the end of the summer, and while it slowly gets colder outside, they prepare. And some years it doesn't really get colder on the same scale, but they prepare either way, so they will still prepare at your home. But the bad thing about this is the ants will generally know that it's hot, then we go down to winter where it's cold, and then we go up to summer where it's hot. It will maybe be a bit more not as sharp, but the thing is, if you just keep it hot, the ants will also still go down into hibernation. But they won't know when the hibernation stops because they don't get this up again. They don't get this 10 degrees hotter. So therefore, some colonies, when you hit these February and you want to say, oh, they're not in hibernation, why aren't they laying eggs again? Why haven't they started producing, well, workers again? And that's just because they still think they are in hibernation. They haven't got this go up again. And sometimes colonies may not know hibernation is over before we get into the summer, because that's when the room naturally gets a lot hotter. And therefore it's really important that you hibernate your ants, because else you may have a founding colony that just doesn't know that hibernation has ended, and then they won't go out to forage. Now I'm gonna give the worst case example just in a second. All in all, this is really confusing to explain, and it's also even more confusing for the ants. They are used to this warm, cold, warm cycle. Warm, cold, warm. But when they're home with you, it's warm, warm, warm. And all of this is confusing them, just as it's confusing me. It's confusing for me to tell this for you. So therefore, I would just always recommend hibernating your ants. To just give you a little bit of a horror story, I had 3 colonies that I didn't hibernate. All 3 of those colonies died of reasons that couldn't quite be explained. Was it stress? Was it hibernation skipping? What was it? Nobody really knows. But 3 colonies that didn't get hibernated all died the year after. Coincidence? Probably. But we're not sure because, well, they weren't hibernated. But if you aren't yet convinced, here are some more different factors. The queen's only job is to produce as many eggs as she possibly can. And she needs this natural break to kind of get back her energy, regain her energy, just relax and really get in the mood once more. And therefore, once hibernation ends, you often get a lot of eggs, a tons of eggs, at least if they get the right amount of protein. And that is because the longer a queen lays her eggs, the more, well, she can't really keep up the pace, at least not with European colonies. So this natural break really bumps up the production, and therefore you will often also see an explosion in the beginning of the new year if you feed them a lot of protein, because all of these larvae will all hatch into pupae and all pop out as workers, while the queen lays a lot more eggs than she normally does. Especially with Camponotus species and Formica species, they often just stop around summer and doesn't begin again. And then right when they come out of hibernation, they explode and just shoots out a lot of eggs, and then, well, slowing down, and then summer stops and then begins again. So it's really just amazing. I remember last year I thought, okay, my colonies won't do too well. I mean, they won't grow crazy. And then there were just so many eggs. It's amazing, and that is, a lot of that is due to this hibernation breaks where the queens get a rest and then go crazy again in the beginning of the next year. Now, the worst thing I've definitely heard about not hibernating your ants is the nanitics. The nanitics have a lifespan around only a few months, around 5 to 6 months, and then they die. But if you put them in hibernation, they get into this diapause, and these 4 to 5 months, or 3 to 5 months, depending on how long you go, doesn't really count to their lifespan. So therefore, these 5 months become 8 or 9 months, and suddenly your nanitics lives way longer. Now, to give you an absolute worst case scenario, if you are coming into ant keeping and you don't want to hibernate your ants, that's just how it is. But if you then have a young colony of only a few workers and a queen, you don't put them into hibernation. These workers, they don't go into diapause, and therefore they die just as you are leaving hibernation, as that's around the lifespan they have, around these 4 to 5 months. Then they are dying. But maybe you get out of hibernation without the colony knowing that they get out of hibernation. Then the workers won't go out to forage because they are still in hibernation. So therefore you now have a young colony with dying nanitics that are not going out to forage to get new protein, and the queen is left with some larvae. Now, she will not go out and forage if all the workers die, so she will die. I mean, this is the worst case scenario, but if the workers start dying before they realize hibernation is over, it's pretty much game over for the colony. Of course, this won't happen just as much with a bigger colony, as well, the workers will die, but they will get into summer and they will realize hibernation is over. But a worst case scenario is you're starting ant keeping, you're skipping hibernation, and your colony is dying around March. You have a queen that's all alone with some brood, and she's totally reset. And you're losing interest in the hobby because your queen died and you couldn't really say why. And the people online just say, I don't know what happened. And then you say, well, I didn't hibernate them. And then everything starts to become a bit more clear. Antholleufer is currently doing a big hibernation experiment. I haven't heard a lot of it, but he is getting 10 colonies, 5 in hibernation, 5 not in hibernation, feeding them the same thing, trying to get a lot of different people on board doing this hibernation experiment and seeing how it all works out. So it will be really interesting to see if the hibernated colony versus the non-hibernated colonies will show a real difference. A clear factor is the workers or the queens will often die at a very young age, like 5 or 6 years, compared to the normal 10 to 15 years. Again, I'm not sure we'll ever see that because I don't know if Antholleufer will do the experiment for that long, but it will certainly be interesting to see over when hibernation ends, to see if there's difference between the hibernated colonies and the non-hibernated colonies. Now, all in all, this is of course your choice because you are hibernating the ants and you're deciding whether you will take the risk or not. But again, if you have 10 of 20 colonies, you can do this experiment. If you are a newbie starting, I just would recommend hibernating your ants. Now, how you hibernate your ants is a bit of a different question. I personally have a mini fridge just for the ants. Now, what I do is the perfect way is to slowly cool down the colonies. And a creator called Basic Ants has done a really long podcaster-like video where he just says everything about how you should hibernate your ants, how you should slow it down and get them into the right rhythm. But to just quicken it a bit up, you need to cool them down just a tiny bit, from 20 to 15, and then from 15 to 10, and then from 10 to these 8 or 9. So what I do is I open my mini fridge, I turn it on and see how cold it gets. I then find what temperature I need to put it at, or what setting I need to put it at to get these 7 to 9 degrees, 7 to 8 degrees, yeah. Then I turn off the fridge and I put the colonies in once the fridge is hot. I cover them up in some kind of tin foil and different materials to just keep them hot for longer. Then I turn the fridge to the hot settings around 10 to 11 degrees and just wait a few days. And once the colonies in there and they haven't really gone crazy with dying or anything, I then turn the fridge down to these 7 to 8 degrees, and then I just wait a lot of months. And once hibernation's over, turn the fridge off and take the ants out. They will be sleepy for the first few days, but they will get out of hibernation. But like I said, if you want a lot more of a detailed video, Basic Ants have done a 30-minute long video, I think. I can't remember. It's long and it's real detailed, and a big shout out to him. He really is he's a clever man, I must say. He's a clever man. So yes, big shout out to Basic Ants. But else some other ways are storing them in the loft, in the attic, or then storing them in the basement, where just areas where it's a lot colder. And now you can store them outside in a shed or something like that, but you need to make sure it doesn't get minus degrees. If the ants get below minus, there's a good chance they will die, and yeah, they died. There's also a chance that they may look like they're dead, but then go out and, well, be more ants-like again. But again, if they go below 0, the chance of the colony dying is a lot higher. So I would personally not recommend hibernating outside unless you know that's in a shed and it's like 2 degrees, but not under minus, so not under 0. But again, it's up to your expectations. So if you can keep them outside, you just need to make sure that it doesn't get below 0, because that can be fatal for the colony. But with all that said, that has been it for this video. Quite a long video just talking about hibernation. But well, hibernation is a serious topic, and personally I see a lot of people not taking it serious. And I just know that all of these stories of colonies dying of weird reasons is coming in these March, April days. And I can just sit there and look at them and say, hibernation, did you do it? No? Okay, well, I can't say that is the problem, but that may well be the problem. So yeah, that has been it for this video. Now, if you have anything against hibernation, or just think I said something completely wrong, please let me know down below, because it's always good to have a little bit of a discussion about hibernation. I may have understood something completely wrong, or maybe you have understood something completely wrong. Let's discuss that in the comments down below. But that has been it for this video, Holleufer. So I hope you liked this video. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Become a member. No, I'm not monetized, so you can't become a member anymore. Sad. But yeah, Holleufer, don't forget to like and subscribe, and I will see you all in another video. Bye!